Yep, this is my trusty Lumix S5iiX. I purchased this in April 2024. I've shot multiple weddings with it. I've done a few photo shoots with it as well, and I'm so happy with this camera. And this is my super long-term review of the Lumix S5iiX. Point of note as well, a lot of the clips that you're seeing, and I'm gonna have it marked as well, a lot of the clips that you're gonna see was shot last year. I think it was in March of last year, 2025. It's just now being posted. Bear with me, I have semi-valid reasons, but it's now being up. So you're gonna get to see or hear about all that I've gone through with this camera and how well it has served me, the pros, the cons, would I recommend it, and am I gonna be upgrading? Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm OC Imogen, your friendly neighborhood camera guy, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a long-term review of the Lumix S5iiX. Let's pretend I have it here in my hand. I'm pretending because I'm actually shooting this close up here on the Lumix S5iiX, and I'll be with you shortly. Back to the Lumix S5iiX. So I originally had Sony cameras, well, before this move. To give some context, I had a Lumix G85 and I absolutely loved everything I got from that camera. It produced beautiful photos and beautiful videos. However, as we all know, those Lumix cameras had contrast detect autofocus and it was not very reliable. Now, I had to, especially after shooting two kids, toddlers, I had to make the switch from Lumix over to Sony specifically for autofocus. Now, I know there are a lot of persons that actually made that switch from Lumix or from whichever brand over to Sony just because of autofocus. Come on, admit it. You know I'm right. You know I'm telling the truth. But yeah, I made that change from Lumix to Sony. I'm not saying I was never happy. I had a Sony a7 III and a Sony a7S II. And again, I'm not saying I wasn't happy, but there was something that was missing. And I don't know if it was a sign, but I ordered the Sony, or rather the Sigma 28 to 70 millimeter lens for the Sony E-mount. And that order was done in October, I think 2022. And for some reason, delivery got messed up. Now, I never got that refund until February the following year. And if you recall, if you retrace the steps, that's when Lumix actually came out with the S5iiX, or the new phase of Lumix cameras with the phase detect autofocus. That was enough to convince me to switch over. So I sold both my bodies, all the lenses that I had for the Sony system, and I waited a few months without having a camera. Sad times. I waited a few months before I was able to grab the Lumix S5iiX. This review is definitely long overdue. I've had this camera for quite a while. I've shot a lot of weddings, a lot of events, and some photo gigs as well in that time. And I think it is the right time to go ahead and give my long-term review of the Lumix S5iiX. Naturally, there are going to be pros and cons to whichever system you're shooting on, and I'm going to go ahead and give you my rundown of my pros and my cons. Mine might be different from other persons, but based on how I shoot, this is how it benefits me or it subtracts from what I do. Now, we're going to start off with the pros. And one of the most significant things that came to me using the Lumix S5iiX is the 6K open gate. Now, hearing about 6K, you might think, ooh, that's gonna be crazy for my system and I don't really need it. And in reality, you don't actually need it. You can shoot 1080p just the same and get really good quality out of it. However, when you have the ability to shoot 6K open gate, you are able to zoom in, zoom out just like this. Just like, I hope I remember to do this in the edit. Just zoom in. Okay, zoom out. Okay, whew, good job. All right, yeah, being able to do that is one of the best things that you can have. And also, if you shoot it correctly, you will not have to turn your camera vertically in order to capture vertical images. You can go ahead and shoot horizontally and just crop in, and you won't lose a lot of quality. So that's one of the pros for me for the Lumix S5iiX, and of course the Lumix S5 II as well. With the next one on the list, I'm not trying to throw shade or anything like that, but I do know a lot of persons who shoot Sony, and in all honesty, where firmware updates are concerned, those things are far and few between, and when they do get those firmware updates, it's very minimal. Lumix consistently sends out firmware updates for the Lumix S5 II, the Lumix S5 iiX, and a majority of their cameras, as a matter of fact. And this is expected especially for the newer line of cameras, because they have the phase detect autofocus, and what is happening is that it's not going to be perfect from the jump, so they're learning as they go along, and they're consistently putting out firmware updates to work on these things. In addition to that, when they release a camera that has a specific feature and it's not on one of these cameras here, we, the users, complain, or not say complain, but we voice our opinion that, hey, this is a really good feature and we'd love to have it. And surprisingly, we actually get it from Lumix. So I have to give a huge point here on the pro section for the Lumix S5 II and the Lumix S5 iiX. And really, I'm giving this to Lumix because they consistently push out firmware updates, and I'm a happy man for that. As much as the Sony a7 IV is a pretty good camera, I have to say that I'm happy that I didn't go with it, and that's mainly for one reason. And this reason, again, it's gonna differ depending on who it is. But for me, I'm hugely concerned about overheating, and what Lumix did with the Lumix S5 iiX and the Lumix S5 II, as well as the GH6, the GH7, and the recently released S1R2. Lumix has implemented this fan system that's right above the sensor, and when this was released for me, it really was odd, the placement of the fan, but I have to say that it was perfectly placed. The Lumix S5 II and S5 iiX has never overheated on me, never even got close to that. And I live in Jamaica. This is a tropical country and we get a lot of heat, and I shoot weddings out in the sun, and I've never had an overheating issue. Now the same can be said for persons using the a7 IV, but there are more instances of the a7 IV overheating than the Lumix S5 iiX. The next pro is IBIS. I really don't think I need to say much. I have a few clips here that I am gonna overlay that will give you the perfect example of the quality of the IBIS that is on the Lumix S5 iiX and Lumix systems overall. It is kind of obvious that one of the pros is going to be the autofocus, and a lot of persons might not see it as that, but as someone who has experience with the Lumix G85 and also the original Lumix S5, I have to say that the autofocus is an absolute pro for this camera. And I really have enjoyed my time using this camera and getting to learn the autofocus, because it does have its quirks. Every system does. If you put it in a certain situation, it is gonna fail, just like every other camera. But I really have to say that the autofocus for the first iteration of the phase detect autofocus has been awesome. If I have to nitpick in regards to the autofocus though, one thing I will say, and I do hope that someone from Lumix actually gets to see this part of the video, I need you guys to implement the eye detect autofocus for humans just like it is for animals. So for humans, there is this box around our face, and then there's like a plus sign that meets right at our eye, the eye that is being focused on. However, for animals, there's just one single box that is over the eye. And for me, I think that's more accurate, because if it is that I go ahead and I put my hand in the box here, it can possibly throw the focus off. However, if I have that one small box just covering my eye, everything in my mind should be perfectly fine. The autofocus, or the eye tracking autofocus, should be even better than what it is right now. So again, if someone from Lumix is seeing this, or if someone who has a contact with someone from Lumix is seeing this, please let them know to change the eye detect autofocus from this big box to the tiny box over one eye. It will make a drastic change. So the Lumix S5 iiX has what I call TPDAF. What that is tinkering phase detect autofocus. This is not a system that you can set and forget like a Sony camera. You kind of have to tinker with it depending on each scenario that you're shooting, depending on each type of subject that you're shooting. It's not a one-stop shop where autofocus is concerned. But once you get accustomed to it, you're gonna be happy with the results and you're gonna understand how to tinker with it and, you know, just get the job done. So it's not phase detect, it's tinkering phase detect autofocus that this camera has. There have been a few persons who've spoken about this particular con, and that is the HDMI lag. Once you connect this to a monitor, doesn't matter what type of monitor it is, you're gonna experience some form of HDMI lag. But I find that it doesn't hurt what I'm trying to do. I've used it before and I'm just focusing on what's going on the monitor, and if somebody's moving and I need to pan and track them, I find that it's pretty easy to do because it's not that big of a deal. But it is something that I wish didn't exist in this particular camera. And of course, one of the cons of the Lumix S5 iiX is that 4K 60 crop. Now, I've worked around this for the entire time that I have had this. I've gotten accustomed to it now, but in all honesty, it really is something that I wish was not in this camera. I wish there wasn't that crop, because for example, I have a 20mm f2 lens, a Sigma lens, and if I'm doing something and I switch to 60 FPS with that particular lens, that's no longer a 20mm lens. It's still gonna be a bit wide. I think it's gonna be like 28 or something like that. It's still gonna be a bit wide, but at the same time, it's not that 20mm, which is exactly why I purchased the Viltrox 16mm f1.8 lens. If I am to add another con, it would be really a small nitpick, and that would be the fact that the screen just flips out. And before we had the other Lumix cameras with the tilt flip screens, this was never an issue, but the fact that we now know about it, it's something that definitely intrigues us, and definitely wish that this camera had that tilty flippy screen. But the fact that it doesn't affect how I feel about this camera. Honestly, it is still a pretty awesome camera. There's not gonna be a camera that exists that doesn't have a few cons. I'm shooting this in July 2026 when the S1 II exists, a camera that does not have that 60 FPS crop. And honestly, that appeals to me. But it doesn't appeal to me enough to give up on the Lumix S5 iiX. I still love this camera, and I'm convinced that this camera is enough camera for me in 2026 and beyond. Would I like to upgrade? Yes, I would. Would I like to not have that 60 FPS crop? Yes, I would. But I don't think it's necessary for me to get the S1 II at this moment. However, I am and have always been waiting on Lumix to drop a camera that has the Canon C50 body. I'm honest. I mean, if they drop a camera that is pretty much a copy of the Canon C50, I hate how much I love the body of that camera, but if they drop a camera that has the body style of the Canon C50 with all of Lumix's firmware, software, hardware in that body, that is something that definitely appeals to me, and that is something that I would love to get my hands on. A box style camera that's made for filmmaking, not the S9. I do like the S9, and I probably will purchase an S9 for a backup camera, but I need something similar in body to the Canon C50. That's just Lumix NVL mount. But this has been my review of the Lumix S5 iiX. All the pros, all the cons. I do hope that you enjoyed. And if you made it through to the end of this review, I just want to thank you so much. My name is OC from OC Imaging. Just reminding you to like, share, and subscribe. And peace out. Oh, I cannot believe this shit. I just recorded such a beautiful take of this video, and I didn't press record. perfectly, and I've never had an overeaten. The S1 II is a camera that exists, and a camera that does the a camera does the on that thing. I'm gonna be on that thing like white on rice. Such a weird phrase.